Reading her bio, I realized she specializes in childhood studies and how children make meaning through play and storytelling. She is a brilliant writer and educator whose work has appeared in The Wire and India Forum. Please put your hands together for the wonderful Sumana Kasturi.
That was a very spectacular introduction. I'm just the moderator. The authors are right next to me. They are the ones doing the special writing. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's panel on writing verse for children, a form that is often misunderstood, frequently underestimated, but probably one of the most demanding kinds of writing. Today, our panel brings together two writers who work at this intersection of craft and imagination to understand more about their writing lives and what motivates them. I'm happy to introduce Whitaker, famed conservationist and herpetologist and co-founder of the Madras Snake Park and the Madras Crocodile Bank. She has also been a teacher and a principal for many years and is the author of over 20 books on environmental issues, mostly for young people. These include Kali and the Rat Snake, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, Andaman's Boy, The Cobra in My Kitchen, Salim Mamu and Me, about her uncle, the ornithologist Salim Ali, and many others. And her most of them are very thin books. But really nice. I mean, we're talking about writing for children. And her latest, which we're going to talk about today, Dancing Frogs and Other Creatures in Verse. Moving from Zai to Shobha, I'm also happy to introduce Shobha Tharoor Srinivasan, author and poet, and a former non-profit development professional. Having spent 2 decades as an advocate and fundraiser for people with disabilities, she has since pivoted to doing many different things, including voice work for documentaries, audiobooks, and of course, a lot of writing. She has published children's books in both India and the United States, including the award-winning Indie Alphabet, How Many Lines in a Limerick, The Prince with a Paintbrush, which many of us bought at last year's festival, and It's Time to Rhyme, poems for kids of all ages. Today, we will be talking about 2 of her books, It's Time to Rhyme, and the other one, Let's Use Our Words. Please join me in welcoming our panelists. So, many people assume, and Zai, we were talking about that yesterday, that writing for children is actually easier than writing for adults. Fewer words, simpler sentences, slim books, as you just said. How hard can it be? And yet, anyone who has seriously tried to write for a child knows that the opposite is true. You're writing for a reader who's still discovering language, forming a sense of self and readership, still learning how stories work, and who's also often a pretty uncompromising critic and someone who can be brutally honest. No pretending there. So this brings me to my first question to both of you. Why does writing for children carry this strange reputation of being easy, when in fact it demands precision, restraint, imagination, and respect? You can't talk down to a child, they immediately pick up on it. And yeah, so a respect for the intelligence of our young readers. So basically, what's different about writing for children, and how come both of you have chosen to do that? And that'll be my first question. Maybe you answer it, each of you, and then we'll go on to the next one. Thank you.
So I totally agree. Okay? Because it was very useful for me to be a teacher and a writer at the same time, because I would often test my writing on the students, sometimes not telling them that it was my story or my poem. And they gave it to me straight, and in a very, very erudite way, if I may say so, and it was extremely helpful. So I remember one particular instance where I was very happy about a story I'd written about a stick insect, and I read it to them, and I said, so what do you think? Miss, that's really a bad story. So it was very useful to me. But yes, I agree that it's not easy because one has limited vocabulary, limited ideas as well, in the sense of, you know, what you can throw at children. At the same time, you have to make both the language and the form attractive to children. So I'm sure that Shobha agrees that we've both struggled with this quite a bit. And I think there's a difference in our style of writing, which I can sense, is that I'm looking forward to getting Shobha's book because it is about form, and that's something that I studied hundreds of years ago in school and haven't revisited. So for me, it's a much more intuitive thing, and, you know, let's throw this out and see if it works. And I kind of know when it doesn't work and when it works. But my ambition as a poetry writer now is to study form more seriously, because I think it would be very helpful. So I hope your book is good.
Well, it's a delight to be here, and it's wonderful to be with you, Zai. And you are an academic, and you have been a teacher. I was going to say I didn't quite agree with all the things you said, but perhaps I should be a little careful about that. Writing for children is a huge responsibility. I don't necessarily say that it's easy. In fact, I haven't heard anybody say, you write for children, that's easy. I've been on a stage with other writers who say, oh, we're sitting here with a children's writer and writing, and we've just tried to write our first children's book, and believe me, it's a lot harder than writing for adults. So I've enjoyed the benefit of being in a world where it hasn't been looked down upon or thought of as easy. So that's just one little, just my experience. But yes, there is a responsibility, and it's easy in the sense they're definitely shorter. I'm bringing out 2 or 3 books a year, and I think if I was writing like Abraham Verghese or Ruchi Joshi or somebody else, it would take me 3 years to write a book. So in that sense, it's easier. You work with an idea and you frame it into a book, and it's a much shorter and thinner book. I mean, this is a collection of poetry, and it's a very slim volume. So yes, it's easy from size perspective. I think the one thing I wanted to say about writing for children is that, there's poetry of the classroom, there's poetry of the playground, there's textbooks that you have to read in terms of prose, there's fun literature that you can read and get your children interested in reading. So my goal in some ways is to invite children into my book. And so that is the part that's a little challenging in the sense, how do you frame anything you write? We talked about Prince with a paintbrush. It's an illustrated biography, and it was something I discussed with the publisher. They were very keen on it, and I went for walks thinking, how do I write this so that children will want to read it? Because, I want them to recognize the art. I want them to know about him, but why would they want to know about him? So I framed it very simply with a double narrative where the child is investigating who is this artist. And in that investigation is thinking aloud. And that thinking aloud comes as little comic bubbles in the book. So with the double narrative, the child sees themselves in the book. And that makes that story interesting. And in fact, not to sort of crow about it, but there was a competition and children read about 12 books, and this book was recognized as the best book of the year by the children, which is what you want. And they said the reason is they thought an illustrated biography would be boring, and mine is not at all boring. They had a lot of fun, and they said, see, the character in the book is saying exactly what I'm thinking. Why did he get married at 18 to a 12-year-old? I don't intend to get married in 4 years, that kind of thing. So it was good fun, and I put in fun facts, etc. With the poetry again, and since we said poetry, I'll just take up another minute if you don't mind. This book is because I've loved words ever since I was a little girl, and I've loved books ever since I was a little girl, and I've wanted to share that love with everyone. And honestly, I think poetry could be so much fun. And it's all around us. You could write just like Charles Lamb wrote about chalk. You could write about your best friend, your teacher, your mother, your homework, you know, falling down on the snow, or whatever it is that's your experience that you want to share. There's so many things you could write about. And I thought, okay, why don't I introduce 9 different poetic forms to the children and then give them example poems so that the example poem will be universal, will be amusing, will be something they relate to. Otherwise, if you're only introducing the form of the poem, again, it becomes like a textbook. So it's that kind of responsibility of playing with how do you do things so that it's inviting. Did I answer your question? Or is that why I got into it? Did you ask why did we get into children's writing?
How did you come to write it? Yeah, write for children.
Well, I think, you know, when you're a mother, I'm now a grandmother, you have all these ideas, you're always giggling and talking to your little ones and the family, sharing stories, and you feel like you give yourself permission to share them. So that's why we're writing them.
That brings me to the writing of verse. And our session has actually been titled Not Child's Play. And so I was thinking about more and more people are saying, oh, my child doesn't read, you know, they're always on the phone or watching TV and so on and so forth. And then as adults, we often think of poetry as harder to read than maybe fiction. So poetry is harder than prose. But then, so you've chosen to write verse for children, which feels complicated or hard from the outside, but as I was reading yours, they were just so easy and flowing. And so I'm just wondering, do you think there's value in, why verse for children? And I did ask you a sort of version of that question, but as in what way do you think verse is more attractive to a child, a reluctant reader, say, than maybe prose? And I know that both of you have written both fiction, prose, poetry, and all of that, but verse in particular, since we are part of the Kaavya Dhaara team.
Yeah. So I think, oh, sorry, I keep forgetting this, but it has a lot to do with my mood in a particular period of time, and the way poetry can kind of turn language to music, can make language sing, can make words fly, is very different from fiction or non-fiction. So that's one thing. It has to do with what I feel like doing. And the other thing is, again, to go back to my teaching days, the response to poetry in the classroom was definitely very different from the response to prose or short story. And I remember the most fun we had was with nonsense poetry. And nonsense poetry, and mine is definitely nonsense to some degree, I guess, is extremely good writing practice. It's a very good creative writing course to write a nonsense poetry. So we did the crocodile sat in the crocodile with a cunning smile sat in the dentist's chair. He said, here and there and everywhere, my teeth require repair. The dentist's face was turning white. He quaked and quivered and shook. He muttered, I suppose I'm going to have to take a look. So my class just loved it and was reciting it all over the playground, all over the school, and then they wrote their own poems, which were really wonderful, you know. So, yeah, so I think these are two things that it's, you know, it gives the writer a different experience, and it gives the reader a different experience.
Did you write that wonderful poem? No, that's Shel. I thought that's Shel Silverstein.
I was thinking that
I loved it. Sorry. Shel Silverstein was a big favorite of all our children as well. Well, I thought, my God, that's a brilliant poem. He wrote also, what is it? There's a polar bear in the Frigidaire. I wonder how he got in there. And then there's more butter, his paws in the butter and all of that. Oh, gosh, yes. I've already lost track because I was totally moved by your rendition of that. You know, children learn very often, as you said, from the musical aspect of words. So even though, I mean, this is a poetry book where I'm introducing forms, but I've written picture books. 2 of my picture books are in rhyme. One was called Parvati the Elephant's Very Important Day, and it's a little adventure story, so it's supposed to be a story, but the story is written in rhyme, very simple quatrains. It's because when you read to children, you know, their studies have been done that say that children who don't even know how to read, they even pick up the sound of words by listening to the voice that repeats it. So there's a musical element is easier to memorize, repetition is easier to understand. Things like onomatopoeia, which, you know, we can read aloud when we read poetry, onomatopoeia, alliteration, when you have similar sounds, sibilant sounds. These are all things that studies have shown it's much easier for children to enjoy. And it is true that poetry, as you said, I actually taught a volunteer to teach a class for 5th graders in America many years ago when children said that we don't like poetry, it's like mathematics, there's rules and there's meter and there's all of that. And truly, to dispel that is why I wrote this book, which was published a few years ago. I wanted to say that, yes, there is a form, but once you learn the form, you can write about anything you want. And so it's a lot of fun. And so to bring back that element of fun.
Yeah, the cadence, the musicality of the rhyme is what I think attracts children. I remember my children also sort of jumping or hopping to the rhyming poems and so on. So I think you've led me to a question that I was also going to ask you. So maybe you will answer it and then I'll ask Zai. What led you to write this particular collection? In your both of your books today, and then I'll ask Zai because she had told me a nice story about her book.
So It's Time to Rhyme was published, I think, in 2022 or 2023, I've forgotten. And this one is called Let's Use Our Words. You do see that I'm very, very interested in words. I am, and I really believe children will be too. This is sort of a response to people who say, you know, why don't you write something that's not like a big book that goes from start to finish? We don't have time to read as much. You know, all the complaints you hear. Well, this book, if a child complains about, I'll say, you don't have to read it from the start to finish. This has poetry and prose. It has games. It has activities. It has all kinds of things. So it's a hybrid text. And in some ways, it's my response to the changing landscape of children's books that you really have to create new things in order for children to be interested. And this is that kind of a new book. So that's this one, which is my latest. It's Time to Rhyme. I truly wanted to share my love and affection for poetry. You know, I always start out when I take these books to the classroom and I say, Betty bought a bit of butter. The butter Betty bought was bitter. So Betty bought a bit of better butter to make the bitter butter Betty bought better. And everybody says, that's a tongue twister. And I said, yes. And I said, I learned it when I was 8 years old. It's like a poem. You know, it's a poem. It's got repetitive words. I learned it as a child and I still haven't forgotten it. And I've forgotten a lot of other things. So, you know, this is exciting, isn't it? It's the repetition, the music, the cadence, it's all of that together. And in that particular tongue twister, there's a little bit of the nonsense element like your wonderful poem that you recited. So I wrote this book to share that, my affection for poetry, and I wanted to introduce some poetic forms, but I wanted this not to be a textbook, though it's a big companion book for a lot of school teachers and libraries, and everybody loves it, but the children seem to enjoy it too. So when you ask us to read, I'll tell them why. Shall I go ahead and read before we give it to Zai, or?
Yeah, sure, if you'd like to do that.
So I'm going to show you what I mean by I'm explaining the form of the poem within the form. So that's what makes it unique, and that's why it won that award, is this one is called a sonnet in iambic pentameter. Now, sonnet is just one of the forms, and it's a fairly complicated form, but once you know how to use it, it's not hard to use. I've also done simple ones, like an acrostic, haiku, you know, those are all forms that even the little kids in 2nd grade and all know. Even a limerick, but then I have a complicated one like a villanelle, so what I do is I explain what it is in the shape of that poem, and then I give you an example poem that is more fun, that is written in the same shape of a sonnet. So this one is called Sonnet in Iambic Pentameter, and pentameter is 10 beats to a line with 5 long beats. So it's da-dum, da-dum, you know, that sound. But I'm not going to read it like that because then it's not as much fun to hear. When you hear it, you have to listen for it. I'm going to read it just like you read a poem. The sonnet is it's just a simple poem. Its length is predetermined at the start. 14 lines in total, not a long tome. The octaves 8, the sestets 6 apart. The first 8 lines may rhyme quite easily. The next 6 lines may change repeatedly. Though the meter can vary, I'll show you, some sonnets have 5 long beats through and through. Milton, Dante, and the great bard as well, with thoughtful words of life and death did tell. This form they used to express sentiment. They spoke of love and war and merriment. The sonnet is an interesting find, just 14 lines to speak what's on your mind. It ends with an Elizabethan couplet, which means the last 2 lines rhyme. So that is telling you now what is a sonnet, and I've done it in the shape of a sonnet, 14 lines, octave, sestet, and the whole works. Then I give you the naughty example poem so that, well, it doesn't have to be naughty, but the one that's enjoyable. And it's called When Mummy Was Away, which Sumana liked, so I said, I'll read it. I packed my own lunch when Mummy was out, with sweets and treats since she wasn't about. Took out the salad, threw carrots away, put in some cookies, a packet of Lay's, filled up my thermos with sweet 7-Up, joyfully dreaming of fizz in my cup. Pulled out my sandwich, added some cake. This was a great lunch. I made no mistake. But something went very wrong with my plan. You don't want to look in the garbage can. Through recess, I lay on the ground in pain. I'll never try packing my lunch again. All that sugar gave me a tummy ache. Junk food for lunch is a major mistake. So children always enjoy that poem when I read it. And I'll say, well, you know what it is? And then we talk about the sonnet. So if you do that with all the forms, it's a lot of fun.
Zai, how did you come to write this book, this particular collection? You've written lots of stories and picture books, but this is a collection of poems.
This collection of poems had its beginning in my sister's illness. My sister, who was very close to me, just a year and a half older, and we were very, very close, and she had cancer. And we knew that she wasn't going to make it. It was pancreatic cancer. And so I gave up my job in Chennai and I moved to Delhi to be with her, for the remaining time. But I was very keen that we have a good time also for the last few months of her life. And she was also a writer. Actually, the truth is, I am also a writer. She was the main one. She had written several novels. She was a translator of Urdu. So I thought we would write, that I would write funny little poems about animals, but not tiger, lion kind of animals. Animals that children don't usually like and don't know very much about, and some of which I didn't know very much about, but I wanted to learn more about them. So every morning was when she would sleep, and I would write my poem. And then in the afternoon, I would read it to her, and we would discuss it and have a few laughs and discussions, and then I would finish it off at night. So there are 3 categories of poems. One were the creatures that I knew pretty well because I had been working at the snake park and the croc bank. So, for instance, there's one on chameleons, which I'll read to you, and I used to have chameleons as pets. So even watch them hatch out of the egg, they're this tiny. And the other category was one that I had read about or heard about. We had a lot of researchers coming and going to the croc bank, so a lot of stories about hermit crabs, for instance, in the Andamans. So I wrote about the hermit crab. And then sometimes I just let my imagination go mad and made snakes talk and discuss things and, you know, that kind of thing. So I'd like to, can I read? Yeah. So the chameleon. I got it. So you all know about chameleons and how they just kind of disappear in a tree because they change colors. Now I see him, now I don't. He simply isn't there. He's done his disappearing act, vanished into air. Oh, there he is, bold magician, who likes to come and go by changing costumes rapidly so that he doesn't show. Now he's turned into a twig, now a leafy bunch. He's an MSc in camouflage, at least that is my hunch. Each eye is independent and rotates on its own, alert for prey or predator in its treetop zone. A traffic helmet on his head, a very bony bum, a thin and curly-whirly tail, tongue like bubble gum. A flash of pink, the tongue shoots out to catch a passerby, a beetle, cricket, grasshopper, or just a plain old fly. The tongue tip has a sticky glue with which it hunts with ease. A sticky insect on your tongue? Not for me, thanks, please. So that's the chameleon. And then I've always been fascinated by scorpions and their natural history and their love life. So this is about scorpions. And I was very privileged to spend a lot of time with the Irula snake catchers of Tamil Nadu. And once when they were hunting termites, these termites were streaming out of the mound, and the Irulas were catching them, and birds were catching them, frogs were catching them. And then along came the scorpion and just sat there and just stuffed his mouth with, you know, termites for an hour, and finally, you know, could hardly move. It sort of reminded me of when we've overeaten and it's like we can't get up. So lots of very interesting things about scorpions, actually. Miss Scorpion, on a starful night, met a mister, and out of sight of other creatures, danced away a lively arachnid ballet. For that's what scorpions do, in case you never knew. This is part of their mating ritual. They actually do a kind of waltz. Arm in arm and claw in claw, such perfect love you never saw. Before the dawn light hit the sky, they were married, my oh my. For that's how scorpions wed, in case you've never read. The babies, they are white, not black, and ride on mummy piggyback. Molting skins, they quickly grow. The baby load does make mum slow. For that's how scorpions grow, in case you didn't know. At last the kids become too large to ride on this maternal barge. It's time to leave, because if not, mum might gobble up her lot. For that is scorpion law, in case you never saw. Now each of them must get to work and make a burrow where to lurk, and wait for food to saunter by, gobble it up before it can fly, for that's how scorpions sup, in case this passed you up. Now they rule the underground, hunt their prey without a sound, kill it with a tiny drop of toxin from the red tail top. For that's how scorpions hunt, in case you never learnt. So, yeah, fascinating creatures. Of course, good to stay away from them as well, but so anyway, my sister and I, at this very difficult time, we had a lot of fun because of these poems. Yeah, it really was.
What a wonderful way to spend the time, and also have as a memory of her, in addition to her own writing.
This is a real gift to children, your book. I mean, it's a great way to learn about these arachnids and...
It was a great way for me to learn as well as I was writing the poem. Yeah.
And so that actually brings me neatly to my last question, and I'll ask it, and then I would like you to read a little bit, maybe another one, and then we'll give a little more time than usual to the audience if they have questions, and we can read. And so what I see as a sort of an enduring tension with children's writing, or writing for children, is, should this writing teach lessons? So there's a camp that says it should, and then there's a camp that says it shouldn't. But both of you seem to actually have an underlying theme. Even if it's not a lesson, there's a theme that you are sort of conveying. Zai, your work as a conservationist, your lifelong passion as a naturalist and conservationist, you're teaching, or you're sharing your love of the natural world. And Shobha, probably you're sharing your love of language and words itself. So then, as writers for children, do you feel obliged to instruct, to shape ideas, values, and so on? And what is our primary responsibility? To do that, or to just tell a compelling story and trust that meaning and understanding will emerge on its own? And so I will not talk more than that. I would like for each of you to sort of address that idea. I mean, I feel it's clear that you do have an underlying theme, whether you want to call them lessons or not. And then maybe read a little bit more of your poetry.
But I think our prime responsibility is that they should enjoy our writing. And sometimes we manage to sneak in a lesson into the writing, unconsciously or consciously. Sometimes we don't. But the main thing is it should be enjoyable, and that's the challenge.
But you've also, in this book and so much of your other writing, you've been keen to share your love of the natural world. And so in that sense, I guess
think
that's a
in my
lesson.
writing, it definitely defines my writing, and that's what gives me the inspiration to write. Yeah.
So, you know, I came to this about less than 15 years ago. I did write before that, but not publish books for children. And this is such an incredible platform that has been given to us as children's writers. And with it, as I said, comes so much responsibility. Of course, the idea is to welcome children into it, to make it enjoyable for them. But I am fairly conscious in all of the books that I write that there is a bit of a takeaway. Now, the takeaway can't be so obvious that it seems like a textbook, but in every story I tell, I want there to be a layered meaning. So, for instance, you know, if it's Sandalwood Story, which as I might enjoy because it's a picture book, but it uses an ecological framework. And I talk about trees. You know, today you go to any place, you know, any hill station, because of the fact that buildings are taking over the hillsides, we have more natural disasters. Everywhere you go, you're seeing this. Same thing with animals. You know, there used to be, whatever it is, 40,000 or no, 400,000 elephants at the turn of the century, and now it's only 40,000, I believe, in the wild. When you look at things like that, I feel I need to write stories where I can have an opportunity for children to discover more about all this. They are going to be the future stewards of the planet. They're going to be, and so a book like this is so important. They need to understand that we share a global world, that, you know, what they read today will hopefully inform them. We need leadership of a thinking kind. The world is imploding and is on fire everywhere, and it's quite scary. And so to live in these times in a playful way, I do take that, you know, what you said. Mine doesn't merely come from my interest, but from an idea that I have this platform, I've been given this incredible opportunity to go and talk to children, and I travel all over India talking to children, make my book sort of sing some story to them. So that is something that I work with, and every one of the books comes from a universal perspective, a shared humanity perspective, and a global citizenry perspective. We may all be different or all be special, but we still share the same world.
Thank you, Shobha.
Sure.
And Zai. So maybe you could read something from your other book as well, and then after that, Zai, if you could read some more. I'm assuming the audience would prefer to listen to the poetry than me. So
I haven't.
and after that, we'll open it up for questions.
So this book is entirely about playing with words. So it's not about what I said, like Sandalwood Story or Parvati the Elephant or any of that. But I'm hoping that it'll be a tool that they enjoy, that they can play word games like I did as a child, and that this will serve them both in the classroom and in the playground. So it's given with that kind of love. But there is, you know, English is such a bizarre language in some ways. On one level, it's wonderful because it's organic and constantly changing. Words like IOR in the Oxford English Dictionary. We have Riz. Children are speaking different languages that soon will be in the dictionary as well. So I wanted to read this playful, because I told you I'm a voiceover talent as well, and I love the sound of words. So this one is called, I have to find the page, 1 second. It's called How Many Sounds Does a Sea Make? And I think it's 72, because I read it somewhere else. Here we are. How many sounds can a sea make? Now, it's a little bit easier if you were seeing it on the page, but I'll read it to you. How many sounds can a sea make? I bet you'd like to know. It's usually hard, like a k sound, unless E-I-Y follows, like so. Thus, seas, cider, cyber, and cedar sound like S when C's the letter. But with an A, O, or U for a hard sound, we hear, bless you, we hear K, like in capital, contain, and capture. The silent C is quite unusual when paired with the letter S. It makes no sound as when not heard in scissor. But school and scandal, just take a guess. The quiet C has a silent sound and a sh sound. It's what we hear in precious and social. And ocean stays within the rule, but ocelot remains quite special. And C with an H has its own rules. We hear both sh and k sometimes. When CH starts the word, it sounds soft, like change, but when in the middle, a hard echo sounds. Okay, wait. A hard echo, it chimes. Sorry, sometimes it chimes. Well, it wouldn't be English without a few exceptions, and it wouldn't be English without those words. And now that C sounds have been illustrated, you've learned the right rules and the absurd. You know, I had so much fun writing these poems, just like I can tell you did writing yours. It makes you smile when you write them, and I'm hoping that children will smile too when they're learning the rules.
So I'm sure that you all join me in loving the hermit crab, right?
Why don't you use this one? That one doesn't seem on.
So this is about the hermit crab. The hermit crab is different and doesn't really gel with all the other normal crabs because it has no shell. This unfair omission is certainly not right. Heard of legless centipedes or zebras without white? But the hermit's attitude is positive and fine. Finders keepers, he believes, and what I find is mine. Very good. So the naked hermit crab finds a shell and tries it. This he has to keep on doing till he finds the perfect fit. He scuttles away proud as pie, quite a dapper sight. But soon he's grown a little more. His shell is now too tight. I think you're all poets. Time to look for clothes again, and he's about to bawl. But here's a gown just made for him, collar size and all. His favorites are the periwinkles, as he likes the color scheme. Pink and gray, a touch of brown, a little dash of cream. Yeah, so that's the... But the funniest things about hermit crabs is that now, of course, shells are hard to find on the beach, right? Because of all the pollution, you know, ocean pollution that's going on. And so they sometimes can't find a shell that fits, but they find some piece of a Coca-Cola bottle or, you know, bit of plastic and clap it on themselves so they look hilarious. And of course, it's one of the most tragic sights of today's world that
I think, thank you so much. That was so fun. I read all of the books by myself, and I did not read them aloud, but it's wonderful to hear you both read them aloud. I think we'll now open up for questions. We have 4 minutes, so maybe 2 or 3 questions. Usha is keeping me on track. Somebody with a mic? Yeah. Anybody?
Hello, my question is to Ms. Shobha.
I think what we'll do, because we're short on time, we'll take 2 or 3 questions together. Do say whoever you'd like to ask, and then we'll have them answer, just to save. Sure.
One for both, but then
Yeah.
others just
So ask both and
yeah.
then.
You just said
It's
that you're
not
a
on.
mother and a grandmother as well. So as a mother, you would be writing some stories, and a grandmother. So has the scenario changed? Because I experienced this of late. While I was narrating a story to a 5-year-old, and I was narrating stories of my times, of the prince and the princess and the Cinderellas, which I think she didn't enjoy at all. So as we are evolving, are the topics changing? Or are we still looking into those gender bias, or, are we evolving in a certain way for children as well?
Hello? Of course, things are evolving and changing on a daily basis. As they say, children don't even have the attention for long conversations anymore. We're adapting all the time. I think when my children were little, I was reading to them, and we would have a lot of fun reading books that I liked. Then they started reading early on their own, and we didn't really need to read to them anymore. I didn't have the time to create my own work until they grew up. And so my writing is really more for the grandchildren than they are for my children, because my children are grown now. They both are not parents, but one is, and so they've left the home. With grandchildren, you're discovering things about what they find interesting, and there's a lot more literature out there that they're reading that I didn't know anything about. So there is that exchange. But I just bought a copy of My Family and Other Animals by Gerald Durrell, which used to be one of my favorite books when I was a kid. I haven't read it since then, since class 8 or something. But I just got a copy here in India, and I'm very excited to share it with my granddaughter and find out what she thinks about it. So I think we can bring back the old classics as well.
A good book is a good book, right?
Ma'am, as you said that you're an environmentalist and you are kind of writing poems, are you basically, I'm sorry I've not read, but are you basically writing only on animals, or is it just about other things? Because it's very interesting to learn, to hear the poem as well as learn as well for the children, because like you said about the hermit crab and conservation, are the children enjoying this stuff more, or just the limericks or some kind of nonsense poetry that you would be?
Well, each poem is preceded by a little fact sheet about the animal. So they know that those facts are real.
She doesn't like a mic.
Obviously they know there's a poem about cobra speaks his mind, so they know that the cobra can't speak. But I think that little thing that goes in before the poem is important.
Then I must say both of you have an underlying basic responsibility which you're going to the children. So it's just not just words.
Exactly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Another question? Any other? Yeah, all the books are available at the bookstore downstairs.
We'd love to sign and personalize it for you.
So if Zai and Shobha have time, and if any of you are interested in buying the books, there's a space next to the Book Point stall where they can sit and sign. But it would have to happen within the next hour so that they're not waiting forever. So I would strongly urge you all to go over there, get the books and have them signed. And they're also in sessions tomorrow morning with dream catchers, I think, and story. Yes. And Zai's already finished her session. Yeah.
Brought it alive, like I said, from the book to listening in person. So I urge you all to buy the books, these and any others, and read them aloud. Don't make the mistake I made. Thank you so much, Zai and Shobha.